Welcome, everybody, to a very special conversation with Vice President Vance. We've got a great program for you. Before we bring the main event up, we want to thank our partners, CGCN, Alpha Institute, and we're very grateful to all our sponsors. So I want to list them real quick. American Chemistry Council, One Brief, BitDeer, T1 Energy, RJ Reynolds, Chevron, Meta, Microsoft, Bank of America, American Petroleum Institute, American Global Strategies, and Bank Policy Institute. So now I'd like to bring to the stage Washington Bureau Chief for Breitbart News, Matt Boyle, and the Vice President of the United States, Mr. J.D. Vance.
I'm American made. I got American parts. I got American faith in America's heart. They say.
Mr. Vice President, thanks for taking the time to do this.
Absolutely. Well, I love to be here with all of you. It's a beautiful building and a beautiful morning. I always joke with Matt, but it's actually not a joke. I'm being dead serious that this is the most well-sourced journalist in Washington, D.C. And if you remember maybe 6 months ago, maybe it was actually a year and a half ago, when there was this big conversation in the Washington Post about what do we do to actually get in touch with the other half of America? How do we actually make our journalism more appealing to the half of the country that doesn't agree with far-left politics? And I think I texted Jeff Bezos and I said, if you're really serious about this, you should just hire Matt Boyle and make him run your entire political reporting shop. Now, Larry Soloff, I'm sure, is pissed off at me for that suggestion. But unfortunately, for the Washington Post, they did not take my advice. So I'm proud to be here with Matt Boyle and Breitbart, and thanks for everything you guys do.
All right, so Mr. Vice President, the big news this morning is new jobs numbers blew away expectations.
Huge.
From the September numbers, so these were delayed because of the government shutdown, more than double, 119,000 new jobs. And then also there's some interesting stuff in the wages numbers there as well that shows wages on the rise. Your thoughts on the jobs numbers?
Okay, so a huge jobs report, and I assume the market is going crazy right now, probably just opened, because what this shows is that the Trump economic policies are actually working. And you've got 119,000 new jobs. Economists thought that we would have about 50,000 new jobs, but that's actually just the headline number. If you look below the surface, I think the numbers are actually better. So number one, wages continue to way outpace inflation. If you go back to the 3 years of the Biden administration, the average American worker actually lost about $3,000 of take-home pay. In the first 10 months of the Trump economy, we've increased take-home pay by about $1,200, adjusting for inflation. So that's a huge, huge thing, and this jobs report confirms that. You have the number of manufacturing hours worked in the economy is actually going up. You see the private sector is really driving this economic growth and is driving the job creation. And this is really important, I know, to you, Matt, but really to me. And it's that we are seeing the job growth go to native-born American citizens. And what happened under the Biden administration is, to the extent there was any job growth at all, if you looked at the data, almost all of the net job creation in the United States under the Biden administration went to the foreign-born. Now, of course, some of those people are illegal immigrants to the United States, but that means that a lot of the job creation was actually going to illegal aliens who shouldn't have been in our country. The best thing that you can say about the Trump economy is that American jobs are going to American workers for a change, and that's the thing that I'm proudest about with these numbers.
Right. So now another big story is that last night President Trump announced that tomorrow he's going to be hosting a meeting with the New York City mayor-elect Zoran Mamdani. He calls him communist.
I might have a
He's not
stomach
wrong
bug
about
tomorrow.
that. But anyway, point is that the Mamdani's rise can be attributed to his, everybody's, the new buzzword, if you will, is affordability.
Sure.
Right? Like, so how do we? People out there feel like the economic situation isn't that great. Look, we're 10 months to the day here since the inauguration. But they want to see more. They want to see more action. We've seen a lot of steps you guys have taken. A lot of people are putting a lot of faith in what Secretary Besson is saying, that the first half of next year the economy is going to boom because of the policies you guys have enacted. What's your message to those out there who feel like they haven't seen that gain yet?
Yeah, well, first, Matt, the government shutdown didn't help, to be clear. And I do think that actually pumped the brakes a little bit on all the great economic news that we were seeing. And look, the Democrats, our attitude was, why are the Democrats doing this? They're the party of government. Why are they shutting down the government? For 10 years, they said to shut down the government is an act of economic terrorism on the United States. And it's sort of a question that answers itself, because I think that they were so worried about what the Trump administration is doing that they were willing to blow the whole thing up, hold a gun to the head of the American economy in order to get what they want. And that's going to cause a little bit of damage, but I think it'll be ultimately very, very minor, because we were able to get the shutdown wrapped up. And I guess my message to the American people who are still feeling like things are unaffordable, who are still feeling like things are rough out there is look, we get it, and we hear you, and we know that there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of wood to chop, because the Biden administration put us in such a very, very tough spot. And the way that I think about this is it's always helpful to take this from the abstractions to the actual real things that people are worried about. So take, for example, a dozen eggs. I'll never forget this. It was one of the very first, maybe the single first press conference that the president had done since he had started his second term. And some reporter, probably from ABC, yells at him and says, "What have you done about the price of eggs? The price of eggs are up 300% over the past 3 years." And it's like, it was January the 23rd. It's like, what do you mean, what have we done in 2 days? It's going to take a little bit of time to fix that problem. And so if you're an American who's just struggling to get by, you work hard, you pay your taxes, you want your kids to have good opportunities, and the price of eggs goes from $2 a dozen to $8 a dozen under the Biden administration, and then under the Trump administration, it goes from $8 a dozen to maybe $6.50 a dozen, well, to you, that is still a major problem. And even though we've made incredible progress, we understand that there's a lot more work to do. And the thing that I'd ask for the American people is a little bit of patience. This economy was not harmed in 10 months. It took a deliberate 4-year administration that was making life harder for everyday Americans, that was importing foreign workers instead of giving jobs to American workers, that was over-regulating, overtaxing, overspending. They were doing everything wrong. And as much progress as we've made, it's going to take a little bit of time for every American to feel that economic boom, which we really do believe is coming. We believe that we're on the front end of it, but we also recognize that we've got a lot of work to do to undo the damage that Joe Biden did to the American economy. And the last one I'll say, Matt, is let's be honest, it's not just Joe Biden. As much as I think Joe Biden was one of the most disastrous presidents of American history, we had a policy in this country for 40 years of shipping American jobs overseas and hiring foreign workers instead of American workers. That has caused the economic stagnation of the American middle class. There was one bright spot in 40 years, and that was the first Trump administration, and there is going to be a massive exception to that 40-year trajectory of American decline, and that's the second Trump administration. We just got to keep it going.
Right. So now we're a year removed from you and President Trump winning a massive electoral victory in November 2024. And we're just a couple of months since our friend Charlie Kirk was brutally murdered by a radical leftist. But at the same time, we are seeing some, whether it's inside Congress, outside Congress, some divisions in the MAGA movement. And I get it that there's this issue, that issue, whatever. What would be your message to how to reunify this movement for the fights ahead, whether it's the midterm elections, 2028 and beyond?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have to remember that we have a lot more in common than we do not in common. And that the disagreements that animate the Republican Party, while they matter and they're important, I think these debates should happen. They should happen in podcasts, and they should happen in the media. They should happen on the op-ed pages. It's totally reasonable for the people who make up this coalition to argue about what our foreign policy should be, what our specific tax policy should be, what our housing policy should be. I mean, I had a meeting just yesterday that was focused in the West Wing about how do we get housing more affordable for young Americans, because of all the things that got completely out of control under the Biden administration. You had homes that doubled or tripled in price depending on the geography in 4 years under the Biden administration. We've got to solve that problem for our young people so they can afford to buy homes, start families, and actually build their own American dream. So I think my attitude is, let these debates play out. But don't let the debates that we're having internally blind us to the fact that we are up against a radical leftist movement that murdered my friend a couple of months ago and that would throw many people in the Trump administration in prison, not for doing anything illegal, but for not following the far left's agenda. That is the real opponent here. A political movement in this country that has no animating principle, that has no agenda for the American people. Their sole obsession is to take down Donald Trump and anybody who helped Donald Trump govern. Focus on the enemy, have our debates, but focus on the enemy so that we can win victories that matter for the American people. That's my message.
Right. So now, one of the things that powered your guys' victory, I think, a year ago was a political realignment in this country, where we're seeing working class people shift to the Republican side, and the Democrats, frankly, are becoming the party of the rich. There was a new report that our partners here that put on this event, CGCN, published a couple of weeks ago called Class Dismissed 2. And in this report, they go into detail about how some of the numbers on this political realignment. 75%, more than 75% of the top 30 income congressional districts are represented by Democrats now. That's a totally new thing. The last 3 presidential elections, the Democrats' counties were represented more than 60%, in the case of the 2020 election, more than 70% of aggregate GDP in this country. President Trump won counties 30-something% in each of those elections. So your thoughts on what we're seeing now with this political realignment and some of those statistics?
So let me say a few things, Matt. So first of all, I think that part of what you see as division in the Republican Party is a consequence of this realignment. We have a new governing coalition. We have a new political coalition. We have people who didn't used to vote Republican, and frankly, they have different preferences sometimes on certain issues than maybe the Ronald Reagan or George W. Bush Republican Party did. I think the Donald Trump Party is a fundamentally new phenomenon in American politics. I think that it can govern the country successfully for the next generation, but some of those divisions you talk about are just the natural outgrowth of the fact that we've got a lot of working class voters who frankly don't care what was Republican orthodoxy 25 years ago, and so they're pushing the party in a different direction. And again, I think that debate is natural and normal, and it's something that we should frankly lean into, recognizing that the far left is really the problem that we have to confront in this country. The second thing that I'll say about it, Matt, is I think it's a great thing. You know, and I'm biased. Obviously, I grew up in a working class family. I was raised by the kind of people who were blue dog Democrats, socially conservative Democrats in the 80s and 90s, and have turned hard towards Donald Trump's Republican Party. These are the people who built America's greatest icons, who built America's greatest buildings, who drive our food into the grocery store every day. They are the human beings who actually make this country run. I'm proud of them, and I want to keep the Trump coalition together. That's one of the things that we have to do in 2026. And this is my third point, and this is tough, because one of the things that was true of the Democratic coalition in, say, the 1990s is that because the Democratic coalition in the 90s was more upscale, they showed up, the Republican coalition in the 1990s was more upscale, they showed up in midterms. So Republicans tended to do a little bit better in midterm elections in the 1990s than, say, Republicans do today. And that's because while these working class voters are great, there are also people who don't necessarily show up to vote in the midterms all the time. We've got to motivate them. We've got to get them out to vote. I think it's one of the lessons that we learned in Virginia and New Jersey is that when Donald Trump is not on the ballot, you've got to give people something to actually believe in, something to be inspired by to get out there and vote. They're not going to vote just because you have an R next to your name. You've got to speak to this new working class coalition. And the one worry that I have when I look at so many of our great congressional allies, I do think that some of our folks in Congress, they want to go back to the Republican Party of 20 years ago. That Republican Party was a Republican Party that lost and that couldn't successfully govern the country. We need to lean into this new coalition, do a better job serving them, and that's how we get them to show up in these midterm elections so that we can win not just presidential races, but midterm races too.
Right. Okay. So you mentioned George W. Bush at the beginning of that answer. Now, there's a lot of news going on out there. Today is a somber day for the Bush family and for your predecessor, former Vice President Dick Cheney, who passed away. Today's his funeral. So I wanted to see if you have any thoughts on or message to the Cheney family. I know there was some misreporting out there about whether or not you were invited to that or whatever. But outside of that, there's also another big report that came out a couple of days ago about how George W. Bush and the people around him are plotting for retaking the Republican Party from President Trump and you down the road, and going back to the old way of doing things. I guess they don't like to win, but the point is that that's out there. So any response to that as well?
Well, first of all, my condolences go to Dick Cheney and his family. Obviously, there are some political disagreements there, but he was a guy who served his country. We certainly wish his family all the best in this moment of grieving. On the issue of George W. Bush, I mean, look, as you know, Matt, I don't put stock in any story that doesn't come from Matthew J. Boyle at Breitbart News, so this could be totally fake news. But I definitely think, and you already see this, you saw this in 2020, you're going to see it in 2025 and 2026, there is an effort to try to wrest control of the Republican Party away from the voters and away from the coalition that really delivered the big victory in 2024. I think it's a huge mistake. Look, the American people don't want stupid wars and America's jobs going overseas and wide open borders. That is, whether intentional or not, that was the legacy of the Republican Party that came before Donald J. Trump. I'm glad the president got us away from that Republican Party. It lost, but it was also a disaster for the United States of America. Let's actually have a foreign policy where we focus on the interests of American citizens. Let's have an economic policy that's about building in the United States of America rather than shipping all of our jobs overseas and getting Wall Street enriched in the process. Let's have an economic policy that's about more self-sufficiency. I mean, I have 3 kids. I have an 8-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. I don't want to wake up in a country where I take my kid to the doctor and they can't get antibiotics, because the antibiotics that were invented in the United States of America are manufactured in some foreign country. That is the legacy of the Republican Party that came before Donald J. Trump. We're not going back to it.
Okay, so now you mentioned the foreign policy and the deals that we're seeing around the world. One of the things that's been the hallmark here of President Trump's second term, again, we're 10 months to the day since the inauguration, has been these deals. We were going to try to do this event last month, but I know you got called over to Israel on the Gaza deal.
Sure.
So give us kind of and by the way, we have in the audience here today, I know that there are ambassadors from at least 2 places. The European Union ambassador and the Taiwanese ambassador are here. Walk us through how President Trump has approached these various big picture deals, because I mean, he's got more than, I think, 85% of world GDP now in trade deals.
Sure.
With the United States, and I lost count of how many peace deals he's done this year.
Yeah, well, greetings to the ambassadors. We're thrilled to have you, of course, and greetings to everybody else, including even the fake news, so I'm sure is reporting there in the back.
There's a lot of fake news back
I'm
here.
sure
they're all lined up.
I'm sure there are. I can see their fake news eyes peering up at me, I'm sure, ready to misreport everything that I've said today. But no, we love you guys too. Kind of. So here's the thing about the president's negotiating style. And I actually, we were a little delayed because the president called me right before I got on stage just about one of these deals that we're working on. And what I love about it is that it's never enough, right? And so you bring him a deal and, he sort of asks for this, this, and this. We want this tariff rate. We want this country to drop their tariff barriers. We want this country to drop their non-tariff barriers. And you say, I'm never going to be able to get that done. And then you get it done and you bring it to him and he said, well, I want 3 other things too. Because his attitude is he wants to get the best deal possible for the American people. And for too long, we had trade negotiators that so believed in the fake idea of free trade over fair trade that they were willing to sell American workers down the river without actually negotiating on the interests of American workers. And so whether it's with China or India or any of the countries that we struck deals, the basic principle is we want Americans to have better access to their markets. We believe in our workers. We think that we have the best products in the world. We want to be able to sell them everywhere. That's number 1. Number 2, we don't want foreign products to undercut the wages of American workers. We're actually going to protect our markets, protect our important industries, and that's a very important part of the Trump trade plan. And you've seen it happen in a lot of different ways. And then the final thing, and this raises your point about Gaza or any of these other foreign deals, is we've been able to use the incredible economic leverage of the United States of America. I mean, we're 25%, probably a little bit more than that, of the world GDP. Why don't we ever use our economic leverage to achieve peace? Because when countries aren't fighting each other, when they're actually using their economic talents to manufacture good things rather than weapons to kill each other, then that actually creates incredible economic opportunities for Americans. And that's what the president, that's why he's so focused on peace. He's fundamentally a humanitarian, and we've got 8 peace deals at this point. We're working on number 9 and number 10. And I think that, if he gets number 10 purely for mathematical harmony, if he gets to 10, the Nobel Prize should be awarded to Donald J. Trump, even though he's certainly earned it with the first 8. But I also think that there's this sense that while he wants to save lives, he also sees a world where people are engaging in commerce with one another rather than killing one another. And he just, he's a tough guy, but he's not a violent human. He's not a person, who I think understands violence at a sort of fundamental level. It's why don't you stop killing each other and start trading with one another? Why, rather than Russia and Ukraine killing one another, why don't they actually engage in some commerce with one another, travel between the two countries, engage in some sort of cultural exchange? That is his fundamental perspective that he takes into these things. And fundamentally, if we get more peace in the world, it's good for American workers, it's good for the American people, and the president's going to keep on pursuing peace. He's done very well so far, but he's going to keep on working at it.
Yeah, so there's a lot I want to pack into this next question. So one of the things what we've seen, I think, since your guys' victory last year, the whole world over, everybody I've talked to around the world really seems to have rallied to President Trump's vision on things like trade and immigration. I just saw, and particularly with regard to China and how we need to have a better deal with regard to there, and we just saw the president get back from there.
Yep.
I just saw comments that Pope Leo made about immigration. He said just the other day, and we did a huge story on it on Breitbart last night, that every country should get to decide, I'm paraphrasing him here, every country should get to decide who gets to come in. I mean, that's amazing to see that from the Pope himself.
Sure.
Your thoughts on more broadly how President Trump really does seem to have electrified the world and woke them up to these major issues that we're talking about here?
Yeah. Well, Matt, I'm a devout Catholic, so I followed those comments closely, including on, of course, Breitbart.com. And that's my 3rd Breitbart shout-out. I've done pretty good, right?
There's a lot
in 20
of
minutes.
Breitbart
Not bad.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, guys. But it's interesting because you may not know it, judging purely from the comments of some people on social media, but the Catholic Church's views on this are actually quite clear. And it's that, yes, you must treat immigrants humanely. On the other hand, every nation has the right to control its borders. And obviously how you strike that balance is very important. But there's a lot of room there to actually control your own borders for the sake of your own people. One of the things, Matt, that always frustrated me about the immigration debate is that we ignored how open borders were not actually good for the dignity even of the illegal migrants themselves. You had little kids getting sex trafficked. We had 300,000 missing children under the Biden administration that the Mexican drug cartels had brought into our country. You had cartels using, in some cases, 9 and 10-year-old children as drug mules for their activity. Border security is not just good for American citizens, it is the humanitarian thing to do for the entire world. Because when you empower the cartels and when you empower the human traffickers, whether in the United States or anywhere else, you're empowering the very worst people in the world. Now, you've seen this in Europe, you've seen this in a whole host of places, but it's almost like Europe and America got this idea in their head that to control your border at all was fundamentally uncompassionate, maybe it was even racist and bad. The president and I reject that wholesale. Putting the interests of your citizens first, it's not some ancillary thing. It is the very purpose of government. I am the American vice president. I wish very good things for the people of Mexico or the people of the United Kingdom or the people of any other country. But my priority, my charge is to look after the people of the United States of America. And you cannot do that if you're flooding the country with a ton of illegal immigrants and the drugs and the crime that they bring.
Yeah, so the last question I've got, please give him applause for that one. That's incredible. Okay, so Mr. Vice President, the last question
Even
I've
the
got,
Washington Post applause.
I know, I think they did. So
I got fired.
So Mr. Vice President, the last question I got for you on that note, so is that there's a big discussion right now about healthcare in this country.
Yes.
The ACA subsidies expire at the end of the year. There's a lot of questions about what's going to happen about this. The Democrats shut the government down supposedly over this. But where does this go? What do we do to address healthcare prices and premium prices and so on and so forth? What does that look like? Is it a reconciliation plan? Walk us through what happened.
So what's so crazy about this, Matt, is right before the government shut down, we had a meeting with Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer in the Oval Office.
Is this where President Trump gave them the MAGA hats? Yeah.
This is not just that. But the president whispers to one of his personal assistants. They're all very good people. And she kind of runs off. And I think to myself immediately, oh, what the hell have I gotten myself into? And she comes back with 2 Trump 2028 hats to give to Jeffries and Schumer. And then he has the photographer come in and he points at Jeffries as he's holding the Trump 2028 hat. And he's like, he says to the photographer, make sure Hakeem gets that. I'm sure he's going to want to use it in his campaign advertisements. And it was like a hysterical moment. But when we got to the serious stuff, and they said, we really want to address the healthcare problem confronting the American people, the president said, well, absolutely. We agree. We want to address the healthcare problem confronting the American people. In fact, you people screwed it up with Obamacare, the Unaffordable Care Act, and now you're coming to us saying, let's fix it. Great. Let's fix it. And then they said, I think they were kind of caught off guard, and they're like, well, but we want the fix before we're willing to open up the government. And the president was like, that's like 3 days from now. You want us to fix American health care in the next 3 days, and unless you do it, you're going to shut down the government? How about we open up the government and then work together to fix American health care? And of course, we know the history. They rejected it. They shut down the government. But I don't want to get ahead of the president, Matt, because we had a very, very good meeting in the Oval Office yesterday. I think that we have a great health care plan coming together. I think that it's going to get Republican and Democrat support. And I think the president, look, right now, the American people get crap health care and they pay way too much for it. You have people who are paying thousands of dollars a month in premiums for a family of 4, a family of 5, and the access to health care is really low. This system is broken. The Democrats broke it, but who cares? We're going to work together if they're willing to fix it. And the interesting thing, Matt, is, people say, and this is one of the things I love about the president, people come to the president and say, no, don't talk about health care. That's a graveyard for Republicans. Republicans always lose on health care. And the president's like, I don't care about the politics of it. This system is screwed up for the American people. We need to fix it. So let's go and do it. Politics be damned. I love that. That's leadership. And that's exactly what we should want coming from the White House.
Mr. Vice President, really want to thank you for taking the time here.
Thank you, Matt. Good to see you guys.
Yeah.
I'm American made. I got American parts. I got American faith. In America's heart, they say our reputation needs a new coat of paint and a delicate melody. But I say I like the bruises, 'cause a melody don't mean a thing if we don't have the strength.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have our next panel. If you guys could please take your seats. I'd like to introduce Breitbart Editor-in-Chief Alex Marlow and American Chemistry Council CEO Chris John to the stage, please.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks again to the Vice President of the United States for being here. I'm Alex Marlow. I'm Editor-in-Chief of Breitbart News and the first employee of Andrew Breitbart, something I'm very proud to say. And thank you to all of our terrific sponsors. It's an amazing event, and so many people made it possible. Thanks to all of you. And now, this portion of the program, you're going to get to meet a couple of super fascinating people who made this event possible, and then we're going to have a conversation with the Honorable Senator Bernie Moreno coming up. So it's said that everything starts with chemistry, and today I've got the opportunity to speak with Chris John, the President and CEO of the American Chemistry Council, which is a leading voice in the U.S. chemical industry, representing companies that produce the essential materials that power American innovation, manufacturing, and economic growth. It is foundational to our national defense, energy independence, healthcare, infrastructure, and technological innovation have a strong chemistry sector. And we're going to hear about that now. Chris, it's really nice to meet you. You're considered one of the most influential top lobbyists in Washington, and you have a really long resume of career highlights advocating for important causes to this country. But I want to allow you to introduce yourself to the audience.
I appreciate that. So my mother wrote that introduction, so I'm glad you didn't read that. So, short version is I've worked in D.C. for a long time, and I spent 10 years on the Hill working on environmental health, transportation, security issues. And I've been blessed to work for a variety of trade associations in the chemical space. And, so I'm building on everything I've done for the last 30 years here in D.C.
So tell me about the members of the ACC. Oh, who are they? What do they do? What's their responsibilities?
Yeah, so everything that America builds, protects, innovates starts with chemistry. So our members are the engineers and the scientists that help make that happen. Our members are at the beginning of the manufacturing supply chain. Literally everything that's made in the United States starts with chemistry. So whether it's a computer chip that enables AI, the clothes on your back, the medicine that you take, what we like to say is if it flies, we're in it. If it drives, we're in it. If it saves lives, we're in it. And so that's why American success relies on American chemistry.
So we're not going to have a strong national defense. We're not going to have strong innovation without a strong chemistry sector. And yet it feels like there hasn't been as much public attention on the sector as tech, energy, et cetera. Why is that, do you think?
So why is that? It's a good question. And I think, these are serious people doing serious work, again, at the beginning of the supply chain. So, they're not creating apps that you use on your phone. It's the ingredients, it's the advanced materials that goes into everything else. So it's not visible to the industry is not visible to the general public, but that's part of the reason we're here to help address that.
And it's, I think, a part of President Trump's vision for AI and national security in particular, but I want to hear from you in your words. How do you think they're connected?
AI and national security in regards to our industries, we help enable all that. So think about aircraft and the composites that go into that, propulsion for space and missile systems, for example. There's a whole host of applications in the military space that we support. And in fact, we've worked with DoD to build out, here's where the supply chain comes from, here's what's produced in the United States, here's what we need to make sure that we continue to produce in the United States along with the president's agenda. As far as AI and technology and the support there, you actually need, believe it or not, 500 different chemistries to make one computer chip. So literally without chemistry, AI is just an idea on paper. So, we're vital to making sure all of that happens, and our members are innovating and investing significantly here in the United States so that we can continue to compete and win globally.
So the buzzword of the day, other than Epstein, which we're not talking about, the other buzzword is affordability, and the chemistry industry foundational to that as well when it comes to healthcare, infrastructure. What are you guys doing on the affordability issue that's facing so many Americans?
Yeah, it's all about innovation. So I've already said it once, but I'll continue to say that. As our members continue to invent new chemistries that create the opportunity to make things less expensive, to do things with less materials. So there's environmental benefits, there are affordability benefits, and we're working very closely with the EPA right now, working very closely with Congress to try to approve new chemistries that make that happen. So when the current administration came in, there were approximately 500 chemistries pending at the EPA that had been waiting for approval. Those are supposed to be done reviewed within 90 days. And then if they don't get that done, they get an additional 90 days. So on average, it takes over a year to get a chemistry through EPA. We've got some members that are waiting 5 years for an answer. Guess what? What happens? Our members then have to take that somewhere else to make that molecule. And that's terrible for our economy. It's terrible for our manufacturing economy. It kills jobs. The vice president was just talking about sending jobs overseas. That's exactly the challenge we've got with us. This EPA is willing to tackle that, and we're working with them to address that.
You touched on two key points here. America first, so we want to make stuff here.
Yeah.
And deregulation. And do you feel like things are getting alleviated so far in the first year of Trump when it comes to deregulation, or do you feel like we can accelerate?
Well, we can continue to accelerate, but I do need to acknowledge the tremendous progress this administration has made so far. So we submitted to the White House over 30 different regulations that needed to be addressed, left over from the previous administration. We've already made progress on so many of them. We tallied it up for our board. We have already in the process of rolling back $3 billion worth of regulatory costs at our industry, at the same time making sure we're protecting human health and the environment. So they've made a significant amount of progress on a number of issues, but we're going to continue to need to do that going forward so that our members can continue to invest here in the United States.
If we don't make these products here, where do we make them? Who's the biggest chemical producer in the world right now?
Yeah, so the biggest producer of chemistry and plastics in the world is China, and they're about 4 times our size, and that lead is growing. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but the regulatory overreach, the previous administration was a primary driver of that. So we appreciate the administration taking that issue on. We appreciate President Trump and trying to tackle the issue of unfair trade practices. Again, we heard the Vice President talk about that. And we appreciate the opportunity to engage with them to try to turn those things around so that, our industry has invested about $200 billion here in the United States over the past decade or so. We'd like to continue to do that going forward, but we need to have better smarter regulations. I'm not saying we shouldn't be regulated, smarter regulations and sound trade policy to encourage that investment.
So some of your companies have offshored during prior administrations. Do they want to come back? Do they want to continue to do?
We're looking for opportunities. In fact, there's someone in the audience I was just talking to where there's a specific regulation that is holding them back from making this investment. We're going to get that changed, and that company's going to be able to build that facility in Texas. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity on the table, and we're looking forward to catalyzing that investment with the EPA, with the White House going forward.
All right, I want to change focus now to the proposed Union Pacific Norfolk Southern rail merger. So now we love the idea, all of us, I'm sure in the audience, of a transcontinental monopoly. I'm sure it's very popular. You guys big monopolists in the audience? I'm kidding, of course. But if this goes through, is this going to actually improve services and enhance competition or not?
Yeah, so the challenge we have right now is that there are 4 major railroads that control 90% of the rail traffic in this country. And the reason it matters to all of you is, again, we're at the beginning of the manufacturing supply chain. And so, the challenges we have, the railroad flow through the entire manufacturing economy. But it's not just us. It's mining, it's energy, it's agriculture, it's other manufacturing. And the situation with these 4 railroads in controlling 90% of the traffic is that there's not competition already. And if we go from 4 railroads to 3, there's going to be even less competition going forward. We're in a situation where 75% of our members are called captive shippers, meaning they have one choice of railroad. So if we've gone from 40 railroads down to 4 that control that 90% of traffic, we're in a situation where rates have skyrocketed and service levels have declined. And the reason for that is they don't have to compete for the business anymore. And it's a significant challenge for us. In fact, let me quantify it for you. Rates have gone up 44% higher than inflation over the past 2 decades, 70% higher than trucking. And the revenue that these railroads get from non-competitive lines has increased 265% over that period. When you compare that to competitive lines, we've got multiple choices of railroads. Those rates have only gone up 49%. So what's the reason for that? It's because you got one rail line, no competition. It's the definition of monopoly pricing.
So we just heard from the Vice President. He's from Ohio. Norfolk Southern was one of the companies whose rail line crashed in East Palestine. The Vice President was right there, as was the President, on that. How could a merger make the rail line safer?
So, it's a significant challenge going forward. And what we've seen in every rail merger in the past is, again, that rates go up, service declines, and they have challenges integrating the system. In fact, there's a rail merger that just happened that none of you are aware of 2 years ago, but their on-time rates went from near 100% down to 26% as they tried to integrate those 2 systems. And that was a fraction of the size of the merger that we're talking about right now. The merger we're talking about is the biggest in the history of rail. And so it's a significant concern across the board operationally at how they will implement that going forward. We should learn from previous experience that it never goes well for American agriculture, American energy, American manufacturers, American mining.
So one of the things that's really important in the Breitbart audience, the president's trying to rebuild supply chain.
Yes.
How would a merged monopolistic rail system, how could that help supply chains?
Yeah, so we've got a coast-to-coast proposal in front of us, a railroad, transcontinental railroad, that, believe it or not, would actually make it easier to bring in goods from China, intermodal shipments from China, and increase the competition that we face from overseas. And so, you know, you talked about an America First agenda before. We think that's counter to what the president is trying to do right now. We ought to make it easier to make more here, and to do that, we need to be able to move more here. And so instead of having these mega mergers and this rail merger madness, what we need to focus on is bringing together the current railroads to cooperate in partnership and work together to serve all these varied interests. And we've already got an example where BNSF and CSX have already done that. And we encourage those efforts. If we're going to build the rail system of the future, work with shippers, identify the bottlenecks, the challenges where we have them, where we have the opportunity to actually, Alex, to give the railroads more business. We need them to be successful, we need them to be profitable, and we want to give them more business. And we're willing to work in partnership with them to do that.
So people in the audience are opposed to the merger, they're convinced. What's the call to action for them right now?
Yeah, the call to action for all of you is, hopefully I've made this, you know, the sale here in terms of American success relies on American chemistry, but hopefully you understand that there's a pocketbook issue for everyone in this room and every single American. So the call to action for you all is to let your representative, let your senators know that you oppose monopolies and that you oppose this merger.
So I want to talk about regulatory reform again, because it feels like we're in this AI gold rush. We don't want to lose to China. Yeah. We got to be moving fast. What regulations do you want to see rolled back, scaled back, that could potentially help us?
Yeah, so for us, you know, we look at things like permitting reform. So, you know, there was a bill just yesterday in a House Natural Resources Committee in terms of moving forward. We're for every form of permitting reform we can possibly get. But us specifically in the chemical industry, it is that new chemicals program at EPA. Again, 500 different chemistries that will help move us forward on AI specifically, but across the economy. We need to do a much better job. Our competitors in China and in Europe approve new chemistries between 3 to 6 months. We're well over a year. And then when you put on top of that, building a new facility will take you somewhere between 2 to 6 months. Or excuse me, 2 to 6 years. In China, it takes 3 months. We're not going to win the competition globally if that's the structure and process that we have in place.
All right, so I want to talk a little bit about what we can do to make sure that lawmakers hear what's necessary to strengthen American manufacturing using chemistry, and they fully understand the role that chemistry plays in the next generation of American success.
Yeah, so again, we're at the beginning of the supply chain. Everything starts with us. Anything you can imagine starts with our business. And so we need sound trade policy. We need sound tax policy. We're on the way to both of those. We need permitting reform. Hopefully we're on the way to that. And then finally, we need to make sure that how we regulate our industry specifically makes sense based on sound science, based on protecting the environment and human health. We ought to be able to do that. Administrator Zeldin has us well on our way to do that, and we're going to work in partnership with him to make that happen.
The American Chemistry Council, you guys have a flagship campaign, Chemistry Creates, America Competes. I like that phraseology. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so Chemistry Creates, America Competes. We've been doing that back to the Biden administration to educate elected officials, regulatory officials, to make sure that they know how vital we are to our economy, our manufacturing economy, whether it's energy, whether it's agriculture, whether it's automobiles, whether it's AI. We are fundamental. We are the backbone of the American manufacturing economy. If we're healthy, the rest of America will be healthy too. So we're just trying to work with our elected officials to make sure we can move forward in a way that helps all of you and reduces the cost of living for all Americans.
Chris John, President and CEO of the American Chemistry Council. Where should people go if they want to find out more?
AmericanChemistry.com.
Very nice. Really nice to meet you, and thank you for doing this with us.
Thank you, Alex. Appreciate it.
right, next up, I've got the pleasure of introducing Adam Lackey, the Chief Operating Officer of OneBrief, one of the important sponsors of our event. All right, so OneBrief, it's a software platform, and it's designed to be an operating system for modern military command, and it's got broader government applications too. We're gonna have a lot of civilians in the audience. Can you just give us a sense of what OneBrief does for both civilian and the military officials who are probably watching as well?
Yeah, well, let's start with a scene setter, all right? So we got moms, dads, we got brothers and sisters out here. You know, there's probably some of you that have some veterans in your family, so probably some veterans in the audience. So imagine that you're going to go into harm's way. You're going to go into a combat zone, and the whole reason you're going into a combat zone is to be a slide jockey in some talk somewhere where your sole purpose for that year is to basically make presentations for your boss, right? Sounds like something dystopian, right? But that's the reality is there's an awful lot of Americans that have done that over these forever wars. So if you look at what OneBrief attacks and the problem statement that our founder, Grant Demery, brought when he came out of experiences like that, working in the Ebola crisis, working in Syria, my background, working in hotspots around the world, it's a matter of, first and foremost, how do we bring modern day technology to the Department of War that helps reduce that burden of manpower so that warfighters who join the service to fight and to serve their country can actually do the things that they're supposed to be doing.
You've got a super interesting background because you're from the heartland, you served our country, and you've also served all over. So could you just share a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm a very proud Hoosier, first and foremost. So, first and foremost, big fan of where I grew up, and I owe a lot to my Hoosier background. I'm a father, and I wouldn't put these in order. I'm a Christian, and I very much believe that America wins by being strong, right? And so my background, multi-generational military, I went from Indiana ROTC into the Army, spent 23 years in the Army. Like many of my brothers and sisters, multiple deployments, over 8 combat deployments, which is not a big number, by the way. I've got brothers who have over 20 deployments into bad places. And those are moments when you have to tell your loved ones goodbye, and I'm going to go to spaces where I may not come back. It's not about me, it's about the ecosystem, right? In our company, we have 113 people who have stories that are much more impressive than mine, Alex. But at the end of it, what we are is a company that's different than other startups. And by the way, OneBrief is a startup, if you missed that at the beginning. We are a $1.1 billion valuation startup in the Series C space. And those are old numbers that are probably going to be updated soon. But what I would say is that we are a bunch of scrappy former veterans on the customer relations side that have partnered with Silicon Valley. And we've partnered with Silicon Valley with patriots, with people who look at this and go, hey, there's a need for generational reform in how software is employed, not only in the Department of War, but across our government, not only for the efficiencies in wartime by making superhuman commands and staffs, meaning superhuman means that they can make decisions at or faster than the adversary by leveraging all the technologies that are available. But also to say, listen, we're doing this for the rest of the country, which includes the U.S. taxpayer. So we are making things that are high return on investment for the taxpayer.
I want to talk about how modern warfare has changed. So you were a 23-year veteran, you just retired, but you also were in Europe as well. Yeah. And so you've got a long history here, and it feels like there's been a rapid evolution.
Oh my gosh.
And talk to us a little bit about that and how OneBrief fits into it.
Yeah, so right after 9/11, I'm a Ranger platoon leader. I'm going to Afghanistan. What do I have? I've got some radio packs on an FM. The high-tech stuff was my ability to reach up and set up and talk through a satellite. That took about 5 minutes to get all the equipment set up just to connect to that satellite. I think right after that, I had a BlackBerry or maybe a Palm. Yeah. Okay, so let's take it from that to a very analog battlefield. And the only GPS I had was a handheld Garmin to where we are today. And if you haven't seen where we are today on the modern battlefield, it's amazing, right? It's sci-fi. It's exciting. And there's lots of companies that are working in the space to make sure that when we go and we fight, we win. And most importantly, we bring home the men and women that went to do that. So in the technology space of software, we've been laggards. Why? Because the best minds in software, and this is just the reality, folks, are doing what? They're helping your social media likes, they're helping your fintechs, they're helping build those other industries for profit. Okay, what we need are folks who are patriots, who are just as good, if not better than those that are working at those major companies, to come and work for companies like us, take a chance in a startup, because we need that talent to build the best for the American defense.
Who are you marketing OneBrief to? Who are the people who benefit from it the most?
Commanders, foremost, decision makers. So when I say commanders, it's the people who have to make decisions to send people into harm's way. And so what we want, and when we look at our product and how we iterate our product constantly based upon our observation with the customer, based on the customer identifying their problem and us identifying and providing a good solution, it is the commander and being able to say, are we making your decisions easier by bringing all of the complex data into your mind, into your visualization, however you need it. Commanders are all different. They've got different ways of taking in information. Just think about your companies and your bosses, and some like things visually, some like things orally. Military commanders are the same way. So we have to be a little bit artistic about how we approach our decision makers, and we have to give them, their staffs, the opportunity to create in a way that resonates with their bosses. But it's not just one person, it's a vertical. Right, so Admiral Paparo in the Pacific, he needs to not only be convinced by his staff on decisions he has to take, but he then has to turn to Secretary Hegseth and say, this is what I need, help me resource this, and what do you think about these decisions? Those go through briefs, right? And that's why we're called OneBrief. And it is not to say that it's only the brief. It's about everything in the ecosystem of the military organizations and the government, just like you would in a company, that need to bring all the relevant information points to bear for a decision.
So what are your success metrics?
Yeah, that's a great question. At the end of the day, like the one I started with, it's how many people are we sending downrange? And are they going to do the mission that only they can do? Are they going to fly the plane, drive the tank? And we're going to get, hopefully, those replaced with robotics soon enough. But there's going to have to be a commander on the ground who looks at it, who smells it, who touches it, right? The gladiator scene where they walk through and he touches the grass. That's a real thing, right? You've got to be there to see it, to command it. But we need that trail to be reduced. That's one way we look at it. So if we take a conference, right? The military has week-long conferences by default. What does that mean? So we're going to have an exercise. Exercise next year may have 5, 6 planning conferences just to put that together. Why? Because they're multilateral. You've got a lot of countries participating. They're complex. 5 days. On average, when you use OneBrief in that process, you can get everything you need done in 2 days. And because we're a collaborative platform, you don't even need to travel to do it. So when we talk about metrics, it's about, are we saving hours, meaningful hours, not minutes, but hours that turn into days, that turn into, actually, I don't need that many people on my team.
Wow. Okay, so I want to talk about national defense strategy. I want to talk about a little policy for a second. It seems like this administration is moving policy, even though very China-focused, but maybe pulling back and focusing more on the Western Hemisphere. Can you comment on this and how OneBrief could work into it?
Yeah, foremost, I don't think that the change is that significant because I consider everything that's going on in the Pacific, much like Admiral Paparo or Secretary Hegseth, to be part of the homeland, right? Hawaii is in the middle of the Pacific. And we have a moat, but that moat changes when we have technologies that can bridge that moat. So when we talk about how China is the pacing threat for the Department of War as an adversary, it really doesn't change to say that we need to maintain our focus on the homeland and homeland defense. And I think Golden Dome is a very exciting prospect for that.
Yeah, I want to ask you about Golden Dome, but I do got a comment though also on with China. It feels like Western Hemisphere is still focusing on China as well. It was just China was scolding Trump for blowing up the Venezuelan drug boats. So they're very much with Belt and Road, their debt trap. They want to be in our hemisphere too. So if you're a China hawk, I still think focusing on the homeland is very important. But tell me about Golden Dome.
Yep. So in both cases, where we're talking about the China threat, we're talking about Golden Dome, we're in the same space. What do we need to deter? What do we need to prevent conflict from happening? We need to be strong. We need to be ready to fight.
Yes.
And we start that by having legitimate plans to use force, to use violence, right? The military is about violence. A lot of people don't want to talk about that. But at the end of the day, if you're not capable of inflicting violence on your adversary, you have no credible deterrence, right? And it starts with the plan. Because if your plan is disjointed, if when you go into action, and you see this with our adversaries all the time, when they put on shows and exercises, whether they're Russian, whether they're Chinese, that when you get past the parade, things start to fall apart.
Yes.
Because it's damn hard to move that much material and people and orchestrate that regardless of how many robots and drones that you have, right? And when you start to add things like, I don't know, actual kinetic events, then it becomes even more chaotic. And so planning starts early in the process because it is a repetitive and continuous improvement process. And that's where we are. We're in the very cutting edge, down to the tactical level within the military, to be able to provide that collaborative training, planning environment and staff workflow environment at all echelons, all the way back up to the White House. And our customers today, like we talked about Admiral Paparo and his COCOMs, down into all of his service components ubiquitously, and then all the way back into the Pentagon. You could say the same about the services, right? We're inside, we're deep into the Army, we have a good footprint in the Navy and Air Force, and we're just continuing to fight. Fight to have the right, frankly, to be there and to be represented inside of our commands. Because, listen, I've got a philosophy on this, and if you're a tech prime, you may not want to hear this, but we need to have meritocracy out there, right? As a veteran, I got so much garbage handed to me going out the door. Hey, take this with you to war. It was mass produced, and it's not what you need. Right? You've got to make sure we, as a people, as an American people, have got to demand that the cutting edge technologies that are the right technologies for the commanders are provided for the fighting force. And they're done so through policy, right? It comes through policy. And that doesn't mean that the commanders just get everything they want. There's got to be a compliance level that works. But that bureaucracy can't slow down the fielding, right? And Secretary Hegseth said this really well last week. We've got to get the deployment speed to be the speed of war.
Perfect segue where I wanted to go next. I want to talk about the Secretary of War, which is fun to say, and it's also accurate, Secretary of War. He's really trying to push innovation, speed to market, more critical tools, and he's thinking about fighting the next war, not just fighting the wars of the past. And I feel like this is where you guys see a lot of opportunity. But can you speak about this philosophically? Is our software up to date? Or is our warfighters getting the best software? Does our government buy the best stuff?
That's a really loaded question. And what General Cavoli would say when I was working for him, former SAC year, don't ever talk about our weaknesses. So let me try to phrase it in a way to say that we can do better. Alex, we can absolutely be doing better, and we should demand that we do better. And what does that mean? It means that if a new piece of technology comes out today that is better than what we have in the field, right, then it has to be a rapid assessment of should this replace what's out there. And not a matter of, well, I can't do that because I've got a 6-year lock and a contract with the prime here that tells me I can't make the adjustment. Because it's going to be too important, not only to save lives, but to win the wars, right? Again, this all goes back to, if you're going to go into harm's way, you're going to be put into harm's way for one reason only, not to have a forever war that continues to just spend more money for money's sake, but to win and to get home and to bring our people home.
Yeah.
And so I think the philosophy here, when I hear Secretary Hegseth speak, when I hear the Vice President speak, and what's very consistent back all the way up to POTUS is that, listen, we're not doing this to compromise. We're not doing this to gain parity. We're doing this so that we can win. And we absolutely have a lot of work to do in the software space in the DoD. Listen, one brief today is not good enough. The product that we're selling today is not good enough. Because if I thought it was, then we'd be resting on our laurels and we would be failing the warfighter tomorrow. We want to acquire more companies. We want to partner with more companies. We want to integrate more technologies into our platform. And we want to hire the best talent in the technology space to our team.
For the next phase of defense tech, how can we enable innovation, but also adoption at scale, and not doing it in a reckless way where it could end up backfiring?
Yeah, this could be a book, because I think that there's a lot to unpack with this. Because listen, great stuff happening with the administration inside of the Pentagon, especially with tearing down acquisition, bottlenecks and bureaucracies, rewriting the FAR, the memos that came out. We're buying more commercial product, of which we consider ourselves to be a commercial product because we're not based on R&D dollars. We built what we thought we needed, and we continue to do that, and that's what we sell to the government. But in order to do that, you've got to replace old bad bureaucracy with new slow bureaucracy, and it takes time for all of these processes to be adopted and to really have effect. My concern is that it starts to create a vendor lock unintentionally, because when you're a small company and there's 3 or 4 people with a great idea, but now you've got to deal with all these cyber compliance requirements, which are very burdensome today, you've got a barrier of entry. So you've got to partner with someone in the DoD, and there's great agencies out there like the DIU and DARPA, guys like the Honorable Mike Dodd, you got Emil Michael. They understand this, and what I would charge for them is to continue to think about that echelon of the best ideas can be at any level. How do we empower those ideas to get to the warfighter?
And so you guys represent these venture-backed non-traditionals, I think is the phrase I've heard, that are going to innovate and move a lot faster than the Department of War, which is very bloated. There's a lot of oversaturation there. So you used a phrase to me when we were talking earlier that we make taxpayer dollars go further. And I want to get you to spell that out for the audience, kind of walk us through.
Yeah, absolutely. Because listen, when we're out there, what we are selling is we have to figure out the market price. Right, so we have to figure out what it costs to make, what it costs for us to absorb the R&D. That's the difference, right? So you can look at many a program inside the DoD where they've upfronted $80 million. Hey, go build us something prime or prime with 12 subprimes. And it was built on a contract that was vaporware because there was nothing behind that other than hey, I promise you I can build this on time, on schedule. Okay, that's got to be the old way of doing business, right? We as software companies have got to get the value to the taxpayer by absorbing that R&D up front and seeing the return on revenue for our investors, because we are selling to the government what they need, and the government sees the value in that product.
Adam Lackey, COO of OneBrief. Where do people go if they want to find out more?
Yeah, onebrief.com. We're really easy to find. We're all over the metro signs. Very simple. I am local, too, so I'm very happy to continue this conversation and very happy to be here. Thank you, Alex, for your time.
Thank you for helping with this event, and keep up the great work.
Sure.
All right, next up, I've got the pleasure of introducing the Honorable Senator Bernie Moreno. All right, so it's a very Ohio-themed day, Senator.
Ohio Day.
And you go back a ways with the Vice President. You guys have been allies. I mean, does anyone go back very far with the Vice President? He's a pretty young guy. But it's of all the people, you're one of the people I think are one of his closest allies in Washington. Tell us a little about your history with him.
So I met JD back in 2017. He had just obviously started his book tour, came to Cleveland. The person who was kind of helping him out, kind of navigating things, is somebody who I knew. I wasn't a political person at all. I was busy running my own businesses, and just got to know him. He's a good guy. He is exactly who he is, privately, publicly. He's just a good dude. I guess I would say it that way. Funny enough, we ended up running against each other for Senate. I remind him often, I launched first, and then he launched second. But he got President Trump's endorsement, and it made more sense to drop back from that race. I supported him like crazy. He won that race, obviously, became a great senator. And then in 24, he asked me to run against Sherrod Brown. The odds seemed pretty good. I actually had a 1% chance of winning when I launched my campaign. Yeah. So, but we won that race.
But you broke the myth that you could have a Democrat populist in your race. And this was, Sherrod Brown was the last holdout. You give a real Democrat who understands normal heartland Americans. And what was the key to doing that?
Well, I shockingly analogize it to cars. He's kind of like faux leather, right? So it's not real.
Leather?
It's pleather.
Yeah.
He was a populist only in the sense that he said things that sounded populist. But then if you actually looked at his votes, the issues that he advocated for, he was a hardcore far-left liberal. And we exposed that.
And that I do think for the political people in the audience, I think that is the key. Just remind people they all vote the same. So they might talk nice and they might wear a shabby suit, but they're all fake, like the other Bernie in the Senate. So I like the Bernie versus Bernie battle. So we've all picked sides here. But you've got some mileage out of this. It's kind of a running joke that there are two Bernies. And
Yeah, the good one and the bad one.
Yeah, right.
So look, on Sherrod
Who's
Brown.
got more houses, though? You were successful.
That's true. That's true. He has done a great job of making the 175 grand go far.
Yeah.
But look, with Sherrod, even the whole shtick was fake.
Right.
He was born from a very wealthy family. He went to Yale, and then all of a sudden he puts on blue jeans and some sort of raggedy
tailoring.
shirt.
Yeah.
I think his voice may even be fake. I don't know. And then pretends he's like this working class guy. He used to say on the campaign trail, I went to high school with the sons of carpenters and bricklayers and auto workers. Yeah, those are the kids that beat you up.
Yeah. So you mentioned an interesting thing that you ran against Vice President Vance and he won, and then you made friends with him again.
Well, we were never not friends. Actually, we spent a lot of time on the campaign trail together.
This is exactly where I'm going. We're in a movement now where it's just feeling there's some fissures in MAGA right now. And I've been around long. I don't look like I have, but I have 17 years in journalism. I've seen a lot of cycles, and I think we're going to come back together, but it feels a little off now, and relative to where I thought we'd be a year ago. You guys are both unifiers on the right. Talk to us about maybe using the micro example of you and JD, and then perhaps how we can apply that to the broader movement.
Yeah, look, when you're in business, JD and I were in, you got to figure out what are the commonalities, focus on those, and build from those commonalities. Don't hyper focus on maybe the one or two things that you disagree on. And I think right now the MAGA movement is very clear. This is mostly about common sense. It's about putting America first. It's making certain that we have opportunities for young people to live what I believe the American dream is, and I think we can unite around that. And I look at, what does that mean? It doesn't mean that you started Facebook in your basement and became a billionaire. I think most Americans don't think that's going to be them. What they want is they want to be able to go to high school, get a good job, be able to afford a home, be able to afford to own a car, be able to afford to have kids, live in a safe community, go on vacation every once in a while, be able to catch a Browns game when you really hate life, and then be able to retire debt-free. I mean, that's the essence of the American dream. And all of our public policy should be, are we helping make that a reality or not?
And I do think that there's a unification that we need to remember that it is the left that's our biggest threat. And it feels like we lose sight of that sometimes hanging out online too much. Any perspective on that?
Yeah, look, the threat is a siren call of socialism and communism. And if you said you were around 17 plus years in journalism, you would never have thought a creature like Mandami could have been elected a mayor of one of our largest cities. You would say that's impossible.
Yes, that's true.
There's no way. And yet here we are. And the reality is because we've gutted the opportunity for young people to feel like they can be part of the American dream. Home ownership seems impossible. Car ownership seems impossible, let alone be able to get married and start a family. Like, I can't afford to feed my dog, let alone go out and have kids. So look, they gravitate towards people like Mandami who say, I'm going to give you this for free. It's almost like middle school elections. Free recess for everybody, free lunch for everybody, snacks in the middle of the day, no homework. You win a campaign that way, and that's what these guys do.
But there's conflicting messaging on the affordability issue. This is the big theme, is that I think the Democrats caused the affordability crisis with the Biden inflation and the deficit spending and the nonstop spending. And yet, as of now, they have a chance to out-message us on it. Mamdani clearly is doing it to some degree. He's saying, well, here's the solution. We're going to give you stuff. That doesn't work, obviously. But you're somebody who spent most of your life thinking about kitchen table issues. You're working with families on their finances to get their cars. It's very applicable. What's your perspective for what should we be doing, and how should we be messaging on the affordability issue?
Well, we got to move with quicker urgency. So that's the gut punch that the working class took in this country over the 4 years of Biden can't be overstated. I mean, they totally and completely gutted our working class. They brought in millions, 10 plus million foreign workers, caused a housing crisis, caused an insurance crisis, caused a food crisis. Then they did all the things that they did during COVID, which just created incredible amounts of depression among young people, raised the price of automobiles. Now, one of the things that we have to be straighter with the American public is fixing that 4 years of total and complete disaster was not going to happen in a couple months. So what we have to do, though, is move with total and complete urgency to make that happen. And I believe that's The good news is, certainly I can speak for the Senate Republicans, is we are driving towards that at 100 miles an hour.
So the price of apartments is down. That's good. Blowout jobs numbers we saw earlier. So there's some positive stuff. What, though, proactively should we be doing policy-wise?
Well, we got to talk about why deportations at scale matter.
Yep.
Because I think there's this idea that
That's the apartment connection.
Yeah, because we're saying, well, we're targeting Hispanics. Look, I wasn't born in this country. I'm Hispanic. I don't view myself as being targeted. I became an American citizen at the first opportunity I could. This is not about being anti-Hispanic. This is saying you weren't invited into the country. You broke in. And it's not, oh, we're going to forgive you. It's like, no, you have to leave. Like, if I broke into your house, you wouldn't say, oh, you know what, now that you're here, I'm going to feed you, clothe you, and take care of you. You'd say, like, get the heck out of my house. And maybe they can come back in later, but we have to be clear. Moral clarity matters. If you are not allowed to be into the country because you came here illegally, you have to leave. And it's not just criminals. Criminals is obvious. I mean, could you imagine how insane the opposite is? Well, if you're here illegally and committed a crime, well, you have to leave. No, if you're here illegally, you came in through a crime and you must leave. And we have to control the amount of immigration we do. We can't have 10 million people in a 4-year period of time. It doesn't work. Look at Europe. Do we want to be like that? Is that a good model? It's a terrible model. And we have to control that. And by the way, the price of entry has got to be assimilation. I view myself as an American.
Yes.
I don't view myself as Colombian. That's where I was born. But I made a choice, a conscious choice to become a U.S. citizen. That means learning the language, learning our culture, learning our history, and appreciating that. And I think that there's nothing wrong with being clear on that.
Yeah, and it does remind me of the Jasmine Crockett quote where illegal aliens did not commit any crimes. Like, well, the word illegal is in the title, so it's just...
Well, she wasn't asked to be part of Mensa.
No, she was not. She's dazzling.
Yes, in fact, yesterday, I torture myself and watch CNN in the morning and at night.
Sure.
And last night, she's on Caitlin Collins saying, well, when I said Lee Zeldin took money from a Jeffrey Epstein, I wasn't lying.
Yeah. She did confuse two Jeffrey Epsteins. Yeah, that was great. Thank you, Jasmine. It's all the content for us at Breitbart. We're so grateful. Okay, so I want to ask, though, about, in particular with your, where I feel like you fit into the new generation of conservative leadership, is Trump was right about trade. And he called for tariffs. Everyone said they'd be inflationary. They haven't been inflationary at all. And it feels like this trying to reshore, bring manufacturing back to the heartland, this isn't just a winning political formula, it's actually winning economically.
Oh, absolutely. Look, the experts have been so catastrophically wrong this year. If you go back to Liberation Day in April, do you remember what they said?
What?
The economy was going to collapse. This is going to be a 1929 depression. America's over. This is it. Throw in the towel. And we haven't seen inflation go the way it has. And by the way, in the meantime, I can't tell you, I could name 100 CEOs that have been in my office. We're building in America because of tariffs. I had a dinner last night with a gentleman. We used to make this in Canada, now we're making it in Ohio. We used to make this in Mexico, now we're building it in Ohio. Why would we be against that? I guess the only reason to be against that is if you're from Mexico or Canada. But if you're from America, it's like you're going to bring more good, high-paying jobs to the United States. That's fantastic. The interesting point is the other viewpoint, which is to say, well, we should chase the lowest production site on Earth. Well, in that case, let's make everything overseas. Let's rely on China for literally everything. Let's see how that goes. That defense conversation you just had,
Yeah.
That's over.
Right.
Because you're just going to hand the economy over to the Chinese. It's insane. So, look, we made a catastrophic mistake 25 years ago by normalizing trade relationships with China, thinking that was going to be a good gig, and it wasn't. And we just, some of the people who are still here should have the humility to say, man, we really screwed this up, and we're going to be on the right side of fixing this, instead of fighting President Trump. But you know, Trump derangement syndrome is real. If Trump came out against water, they would say water is not,
Sure.
You should never drink water.
So there's a real realignment that's taken place. You're part of this, as I keep alluding to, in the conservative movement. It's interesting because you think about Dick Cheney a little bit today and how the Republican Party has made this huge realignment, and I think mostly in a positive way. And yet there still is some resistance to this acceptance that the America First version of the Republican Party is here. And part of the way to cement those gains is to make sure that some of those low propensity voters new to our coalition continue to show up and vote, not just when Trump was on the ballot. This is a big thing heading down the road. What do you think is the messaging to make sure some of those newer members of our coalition understand we love them to stay?
Well, we got to be honest with them, and we have to deliver for them. I mean, part of the problem, and I talk to my colleagues about this quite a bit, is when you campaign, you have a set of issues. I'm going to do A, B, C, D, and E. You vote for me, I'll get this done. Then we come to D.C., forget the promises that we made. They asked me to be on the whip team, and I don't say vote the way I want you to vote. I just want you to vote the way you told your constituents you would vote. Like, do the exact things that you said. But they sometimes forget that. And so those voters, what happens is they're like, well, I voted for you and you didn't do any of the things. Right. So why would I vote? Why would I take my time to go vote for you again when you didn't deliver on the promises? That's what President Trump's talking about when he says nuking the filibuster. Because if we go to the midterms and we haven't completed our agenda, what's the motivating factor to voters to say, hey, make phone calls, knock on doors, pass out literature, put up yard signs, get tortured on social media for supporting President Trump and Republicans, and you get nothing?
One of the issues where you've shown some leadership is healthcare, but it's one of the hardest ones. Democrats, again, came up with the Affordable Care Act. It made every year since then, healthcare has gotten less affordable mathematically for Americans. And yet somehow they win in the polls on messaging versus Republicans. How could we beat that? I mean, how could we lose to that? What do we need to do?
Well, they do have a Breitbart aside and a few others. They have a massive megaphone called the mainstream media, right? So Democrats lie with impunity. It's actually pretty shocking to watch.
The vice president calls it the fake news, by the way.
Well, it's unbelievable because I have to. You guys get the clips. I get the full feature-length movie when I preside. So freshman senators have to preside. I call it getting waterboarded. I'm like, oh, because they give us water to drink there, and it's like listening to Chris Murphy for an hour should be combat pay. I mean, the things that he says is so absurd, but the media doesn't fact check him. So what I was able to do during the shutdown, at the end of the shutdown, was Chuck Schumer was on the floor, just spewing nonsense as he does, usually around 10:15 in the morning, and I went out there and just very politely asked him some basic questions. He's not used to getting even the tiniest amount of pushback, and he collapsed. Things like, okay, you want these Biden-era Obamacare subsidies to be expanded. Should there be income caps?
Yes.
And he was like, we'll negotiate about that later. Wait, so you're saying you want to extend it without income caps? So people making millions of dollars a year should get this. He's like, we'll negotiate about it. He couldn't even answer. Then, should there be $0 premiums that open the door to fraud? And then most importantly, and the one that I think we really need to nail down on, we're going to send $26 billion a year to insurance companies where they're allowed to keep 20% of that as overhead. So we're going to give 80 cents to the dollar to healthcare. Why don't we send 100% to the individual, empower them to make healthcare decisions? Why would you want to send this money to insurance companies? He literally stormed out of the room because he couldn't take the questions.
Yeah, they're not used to getting any tough questions, which is interesting. So I want to. You mentioned something earlier that is really fun for us at Breitbart because we're one of the few, I think, established outlets that take Latin American issues seriously. We cover it robustly. And you were born in Colombia, correct? Yes. So this administration, Trump administration, the first president in my lifetime for sure that's taken Latin American issues seriously. Why do you think that is, and are you surprised by it? If you are, I'm sure it's pleasantly surprised.
No, very pleasantly surprised. What President Trump is doing in Latin America hasn't been done since really Monroe, and you could say a little bit Roosevelt. We need to take our hemisphere seriously. The biggest advantage we have as a nation is we have great real estate. We have two giant oceans that keep the rest of the world at check. And what we've allowed to do is allowed some really bad things to happen in our hemisphere. What President Trump is saying is very simple. If you want to poison American citizens, we're going to kill you first.
Right.
If you want to kill Americans, we're going to kill you first. And we're not going to allow narco-terrorism. We're not going to allow international criminal gangs. The idea that Hezbollah and Chinese gangs have a presence in Latin America, like, we're going to turn a blind eye on that. That's insane. So what he's doing is unleashing a wave of conservative movement in Latin America that will pay massive, massive dividends because it's going to end illegal migration.
Yeah.
It's going to allow us to be self-sufficient. We have cultural similarities, much more so with Latin America than, of course, with Asia or anywhere else. So let's take advantage of this hemisphere from the tip of Argentina to the tip of Canada, have this incredible bilateral relationship where America leads and America benefits.
Stopping drug flow, standing up to China that's got hegemonic interests in the region, and I think perhaps winning over generations of new voters. I think it's an amazing thing, and I think that way underrated, which brings me to my last question. What do you think is the most underrated thing that's happening right now in Washington or has happened in the first year of Trump's administration, in the first 10 months so far, that you feel like it's not getting the play that it deserves?
Look, I have to say the big, beautiful bill, part of it being big is in the name. It's like, what does it actually do? The fact that we not only kept the child tax credit but increased it, that's a big deal for working Americans. The fact that we have these $1,000 Trump accounts, think about this. Yeah. You put $1,000 in that newborn baby, others can match it. Employers, I've encouraged a lot of employers, Charter Communications was one of them that did it. You could have a 28-year-old have $500,000 in that account that they can use. That would be a game changer for middle-class kids. The fact that we kept the standard deduction, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security, the bonus depreciation to encourage investment, that's why our economy's humming. We had 119,000 jobs, despite the Democrats trying to tank our economy. Let's just be crystal clear. The government shutdown was about totally attempting to tank the economy so they could win a political election. That's pretty sick stuff. Because the one thing that we should all be united on is we don't want to hurt people or hurt the American economy, and that's what the Democrats did.
Do you think they've had enough hell to pay on the shutdown?
No.
I feel like that's why they brought up all the Epstein stuff again, clearly, is to change the subject because they got humiliated.
Look, in my businesses, we negotiated for a living. To use human suffering of American citizens as leverage in a negotiation is absolutely disgusting. Yes. They did it for 45 days. And for 45 days, they said this is a Republican shutdown because we control the House, the Senate, and the White House, knowing that that's a flat-out lie because you need 60 votes. And we said all along, we need 8 Democrats. And by the way, 8 Democrats came along, total capitulation, and that's why they totally changed the subject. Look, they hurt this country deeply for 45 days. And I had an exchange with one of the senators in a commerce meeting. I said, how do you look at your staff, knowing you're the reason they're not getting paid? How do you look at the Capitol Police, knowing you're not getting paid? TSA workers, air traffic controllers. They used the suffering of American citizens for political leverage. And if they're not held accountable for that, then we aren't really good at doing a good job of communicating.
Senator Bernie Moreno of Ohio, very impressive stuff. Thank you so much for being part of this event.
Appreciate it. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Very nice.
Thank you.
All right. Finally, last but not least, Matt Boyle is going to come back up with T1 Energy CEO and Chairman of the Board, Daniel Barcelo.
Well, I hope everybody liked our discussion with the Vice President earlier. I think we got into a lot of things. We covered a lot in a very short amount of time there. Dan Barcelo, CEO and Chairman of the Board of T1 Energy, sir, really want to thank you for joining us up here and thank you for sponsoring our event. On a personal note, I want to start with, I think you have some news this weekend. Your daughter is getting married. Tell us about that and any shout out for
married, and you know, so her, Alessia in Hampton. So be very excited.
Exciting stuff. Okay, so tell us about T1 Energy. What does T1 Energy do? What is it about T1 that separates you guys from other energy companies?
T1 Energy is building an integrated domestic solar supply chain. Our goal is to bring solar that's American-made for Americans. We do that because solar is one of the most scalable, reliable, and low-cost energy sources. So that's what we're building. We started out with acquiring an asset. It's a 5-gigawatt solar module plant in Dallas. That plant produces 10% of America's solar panels. We also buy our polysilicon from Hemlock Corning in Michigan. And then we recently announced a transaction where we're converting some of that polysilicon to wafers. The last part of what T1 Energy is about is the solar cell. That's the higher tech part of it. And we announced plans to build a 5-gigawatt solar cell plant in north of Austin and Rockdale, Texas. So we will be one of the few silicon-based solar companies from polysilicon all the way to the module side.
So when Republicans hear solar, they maybe get a little bit freaked out. They think of back during the Obama administration or Biden administration, the various scandals like Solyndra or something like that. But what you guys are doing is a little bit different than those types of things. Can you, your background, from what I understand, is in oil and gas. Like, you've been in the energy industry your entire life. It's not some, Johnny-come-lately scam artist-y type thing like Solyndra was. This is serious stuff, and you guys can provide serious levels of energy to the country. I think you could do to about 10% of the nation's energy supplies. So tell us about what would be your message to Republicans about solar and why this is important to get behind as part of an all-of-the-above energy approach.
Yeah. Well, look, solar was invented in Bell Labs in the 50s. China did a tremendous upgrade to solar, and they have a tremendous capacity for solar. China has enough manufacturing capacity of solar and batteries to basically produce, if they wanted to, one American power grid in 18 months. Mm-hmm. So it's factually proven that solar, coupled with storage, is a real energy source. One doesn't have to look beyond my home state now of Texas and look in the middle of the summer. A large portion of Texas's grid is solar. Solar has a zero marginal cost power. It's very complementary to natural gas. It's very complementary to nuclear. And that is an incredibly important point. A lot of people pick on solar and say, wait a minute, it's not reliable. The world, and we don't need as much solar or as energy at 3 p.m. as we do at 3 a.m. It's a very natural fit into an economic system to have solar. The other point to make here is about oil and gas. I started my career in the early 90s, and I was a natural gas analyst working on natural gas. And natural gas was always getting beat up by coal, because natural gas says we're the cleaner option than coal, and we're scalable. And coal would always say, no, 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 no. And what happened, what you saw from the early 90s, the way coal and natural gas almost flipped in terms of the grid components, you also see a similar kind of action now with solar. Solar has a lower incremental marginal cost for the grid. So the point here is, it's everything we have. It's natural gas, it's nuclear, it's solar. America has some of the best solar resources on Earth. To not use it is shameful. The other point on this is really, really important is we're now in a place where technology used to cadence energy. So back in my oil and gas days, technology for 3D seismic, technology for fracking, technology for CCGTs. It was always technology that gated how energy grew. It's wild to me that now energy is the governor of how tech can grow. So it's surreal that the amount of energy that's now needed for America to lead and continue to lead on AGI, we're talking gigawatts a week in terms of it. So that type of energy, it's critical that America embraces all of it.
Yeah, so now you mentioned the two major facilities in Texas, Dallas and Austin. Can you give us kind of an overview of what each facility is doing or going to do, and how much of an investment that is in the state of Texas in the United States, and how many jobs that this is going to create, and what are they going to make, and kind of walk through us for us that, because I know the president and the vice president, they love to brag about how much is being invested in the United States. I believe you guys are north of $1 billion, maybe even close to $2. So talk to us about that.
Well, we're an American company, American shareholders, American New York Stock Exchange, publicly traded. And we acquired for just over $600 million assets, and now we put more money in, close to $1 billion. We have an anticipated project of $850 million for our 5 gigawatt solar cell plant. But just touching back on the assets, the first asset is this 5 gigawatt solar module plant that employs over 1,200 person workforce, has over $100 million payroll. It's in South Dallas. The types of jobs there, despite that plant being 95% automated, are advanced manufacturing jobs. And I think that's another component. As the world moves towards automation, moves towards robotics, moves to those things, we need a workforce deployed that is able to scale it. That's our Dallas facility. That is about assembling. Sometimes I feel like I'm just in the glass moving business, because basically a solar panel is very high-tech solar cells wedged between two pieces of glass with glues and frames. So in some ways it's moving a lot of glass. And what we do is utility scale solar. We are talking about gigawatt scale, solar farms.
Not solar panels on your house type of
We could produce that, but the market right now is about utility scale solar. That's what we're focused on.
Right.
And on the second site, that's the solar cell. So the whole chain is the polysilicon becomes a wafer, the wafer becomes a cell goes into the module. That solar cell plant would be in Rockdale, Texas, north of Austin, very far north of Austin, about an hour. Yeah. But that cell plant would have a workforce of over 1,700, similar types of payroll. And the important thing there is now we're getting more aligned to the semiconductor industry, because solar cell manufacturing is a lot of wet chemicals, a lot of specialty gases, and it's taking in the precursor materials that are very silicon-based, semiconductor related.
Yeah, it's like you read my mind of where we're going next, is because we're talking about semiconductors, we're talking about AI, right? Like all of these things are super important conversations that we're having in public policy. You mentioned your guys' deal, you're contracted with Corning. Can you tell us about that deal? This is a major American company that we've known for a century. Talk to us about Corning. What are they doing? And can you explain too what are for maybe folks that don't understand, because what are these polysilicon? What are these wafers, right? Like how does this all work, right? How does it make energy? How does it help store energy, et cetera? Walk us through that kind of stuff as well.
Sure. Yeah. So. Solar, again, invented by Bell Labs. It's essentially a positive and negative charge that's created in these materials, silicon-based materials. And when the photons hit those materials, they make the positive-negative junction, which then makes the power, direct current power. So how do we get that? You start with silica, it becomes polysilicon. Depending on the grade of polysilicon, it can either go into semiconductors or go into solar. I like to say that the semiconductor solar is kind of like the filet mignon, but then you have the solar polysilicon is more like the cow. So in order to support a robust polysilicon-based industry for semiconductors, there's a lot that's needed around it in terms of polysilicon. From the polysilicon, it goes into ovens and creates these long ingots. Those ingots get sliced up with diamond saws. Those become the wafers, not the Monty Python thin wafers, but wafers for solar. And those wafers then get etched with chemicals and gases, and then that creates the texturing to allow a solar cell to receive light. Protect it with the glass, put the frame on it, and you're good to go. And it'll sit out in the field 15, 20 years. Each panel produces 600 to 700 plus watts of power, incredibly long term. Make it, produce it, put it in the field, we have power for a very long time.
Right. So now the future of artificial intelligence, we've seen a lot of in the news this past couple of days has been NVIDIA with everything that's going on with them, and we've seen Jensen Huang out there talking about different things. We know that the artificial intelligence world is going to require a massive increase in energy capacities, right? Electricity capabilities for the country. I mean, I've heard some estimates like 20-something%, 23%, something like that. Talk to us about how you guys are positioned to help do that, and then also kind of circling back on how you guys dovetail with the semiconductor industry, because the goal, I think, of this current administration is to actually make semiconductors in America. How do we get to that point where we can do that? So kind of walk us through both tracks there. So.
Yeah. Well, look, I think we had an age of oil, and now we're in the age of like silicon. And and to be clear, we don't make semiconductors; we make solar cells, right? Yeah. But there's a lot of adjacency with this industry with semiconductors. The process engineers will employ over 300. China in their industries has 75,000. You have specialty gas industries. You have the wet chemicals, as I mentioned. There's a tremendous symbiotic relationship to build up the knowledge and the know-how, both on process equipment and process engineers to base that. That's one dimension of it. The other dimension is just security of supply. If everything's imported, then everything may not be imported one day. So there's definitely a dimension of supply chains. So when the administration has these platforms of energy dominance, or has this platform of supply chains or domestic reshoring, these are all things that fit very naturally into what we're doing, building it here, building it for American supply chains, and building it for security. Now, I listen to everyone from the NVIDIAs to what Elon will be talking about, the need for power and what they're doing. That power needs are so large that I think when we talk in like 10% growth, it's almost meaningless. America is just over 50 gigawatts of solar energy. We're talking about China has 1,000 gigawatts. So again, China can replicate the US grid in 18 months. The sheer amount of power that's needed to keep up, that it's almost like is the gating factor for semiconductors now not the semiconductor, but how much energy you can get, how fast. And that's where it comes to right now, solar storage is available right now. It's scalable today. It's here. It can go in gigawatts of scale. Natural gas, yes, we have the resources, right? I don't know if we can double the resources. You know, I would have said 10, 15 years ago we couldn't. We did it with shale. So I will never second guess the nature of America, which is risk-taking and risk capital, and that's great. But in order to scale at the size we need, there's just so much. And solar it's almost like you can build this equipment to make solar panels, and it's almost like building a natural gas field. You know, you're just printing out these panels, and these panels go out there, and they will sit there for decades, you know, produce power.
Yeah, so now you mentioned China, and China has been dominating in this space for way ahead of the United States on this stuff. What are some of the challenges that the solar industry faces when it goes, you know, when you are trying to compete with the Chinese? Where are they in comparison to the United States on this stuff, and are we catching up to them?
Yeah, well, I think that, you know, in terms of the competitive nature, there's a few components, right? Like the U.S. solar industry is very robust. A lot of that technology is coming to the United States, and America's benefiting from that, from the power industry. One area that's still difficult to compete is polysilicon. We've made public comments in support of Section 232 for higher tariffs on polysilicon, especially Chinese-sourced polysilicon.
Whoa, hang on, a CEO advocating for higher tariffs. This is news, right? Like,
this is polysilicon pricing advantage that comes from Chinese polysilicon, I believe creates a very large disadvantage to the foundation of a robust solar industry. Okay? I think on the other parts, bring it on. You know, I'm all about, you know, I've worked globally in oil and gas, and you're always competing to be the lowest cost, you know, entity out there. And I think America can be very low cost because we're ultimately doing a conversion of silicon to a silicon cell. That conversion is power. That conversion is natural gas, that conversion is water, that conversion is specialty gases. All those things are things that America can be extremely competitive on. And those machines don't know what country they're in. They could be in Ethiopia, they could be in America, they could be whatever, we'll pick on any other country. But that conversion is something, and what's happened is America just hasn't had the manufacturing. And part of that is we've just chosen to manufacture in other countries and we buy it. But I think the point here is we can be competitive on cost and pricing. You know, America used to be not the largest oil producer. Now it is. 14 million barrels a day versus Saudi. Natural gas, America's larger than Russia. I don't see any reason why solar doesn't also start leading, but there's a lot of catch up to do with China.
Right, okay, so now for national security reasons, there are a lot of national security reasons why we need this extra electricity. Can you kind of explain those for us? What are those national security?
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, I frame it along energy security. And I think that energy security is important, that America should have very scalable, very reliable, very low cost is important too, just for the economic health of America. And when you look at the power resources available, nuclear is great. It may take time for permitting. Natural gas, you got to get your gen kits and your other thing, that's awesome. But, you know, I don't think we're building out more hydro. You know, a lot of other technology is not there. So when you look at the resources available now, it goes right back to the scalability that solar can do with a commercialized technology that's widely adopted.
So one of the things you guys are trying to do too, from what I understand, is you're building a solar supply chain from Michigan all the way to Texas. Can you explain this? What is a solar supply chain? What does that look like? How does that work? You know, we talked about the Texas facilities, but how does this connect up through Michigan, through the heartland of the country? I mean, it's almost like a Keystone XL pipeline for solar through the heart of the country.
Yeah, and we don't own those facilities. Those are owned by Hemlock, Hemlock Semiconductor, and Hemlock is partly owned by Corning. So we'll buy our polysilicon from Hemlock, and then we'll buy wafers, solar wafers from Corning when we build our. So we'll basically be buying from Michigan our wafers, and we'll be running those into our plant in Texas, and then those cells will go to our module plant in Dallas. So that's the supply chain we talk about. Is, you know, we're building that as more polysilicon supply comes online in America, we'll be able to buy that too. And what I was touching on before is a lot of the polysilicon on Earth is China. You know, there's very little American supply of polysilicon. We are 100% supplied by that. In addition to those parts, there are other ancillary parts of the business. We recently announced with NextPower that we will be buying their steel frames for future builds. NextPower will be making those frames in the United States. And there's other, and we keep going from there. How do we get the right glues? How do we get the right glass? It's all about putting that manufacturing back here so we can have the security of the supply and the security of the supply chain.
Really incredible stuff. Dan Barcelo, CEO and Chairman of the Board of T1 Energy, really want to thank you for joining us up here. Thank you for sponsoring this event. Where can people go to learn more about what you guys are doing at T1, follow along, get involved with the associates?
You can follow us on social media on X and also t1energy.com. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dan. Again, folks, I really want to thank all of our event sponsors and the Vice President and Senator Marino, and also our partners here. This has been a really exciting year of events so far. We've done 6 cabinet secretaries and now the Vice President of the United States. Next year, we're looking forward to a lot more, so stay tuned. We've got a lot of exciting stuff on the horizon. So thank you, everybody, for coming, and we look forward to continuing the conversation next year. Thank you.
Thanks,
sir. Incredible stuff. Thank you.